Everyone has their own personal sense of style, and sometimes that sense of style is older than their grandparents. Period costuming or period dress just refers to the clothes that were typically worn at a particular time in history, and plenty of people incorporate some form of history into their outfits. Arguably, the Y2K fashion revival trend is a form of period costuming because it revolves around the fashion trends of the late 90s and early 2000s, but modern aesthetic clothing sects that rely upon such set strictures possess a distinct sense of laxity that doesn't really exist within period costuming. Now, I've been interested in period costuming for years, and objectively speaking, and this is kind of a hot take, within the period costuming community, 100% accuracy down to the last lacy hem of a bloomer isn't needed to achieve a historically accurate look. And especially in a world where most fabrics and accessories contain some kind of plastic, full accuracy for a majority of eras is just impossible without wearing an actual set of historical garments. You can easily recreate a period outfit without putting yourself into debt for a crinoline, and I'm going to show you how with 3 of my own examples from 1910, 1947, and 1970. Now, the first step of this process is research, and there's 2 main facets of this: actual academic research and inspo seeking. So look around for anything that catches your eye. My favorite tools are Pinterest, Instagram, and no joke, Turner Classic Movies, and just look into it. The best sources will have some form of academic citation, so if you're going to be an accuracy Nazi, I would just stick to academic journals and scientifically published media, often by universities. But buyer beware, fashion is among the history departments that is most prone to misinformation. We have been lying about our appearances since the Renaissance, and corsets were just supportive bras. Anyways, speaking of corsets, part of why research is so important in period costuming is not just the myths, but to get to an actual understanding of a very important trait: silhouette. Silhouettes are maintained by undergarments and personal characteristics, and such undergarments have a profound effect on how the garments will fit and sit upon the body, and traits like age and social standing often determine the appearance of the clothes themselves. For example, undergarments for women in the early 1900s, which would be the Gilded Age, Edwardian era, or Belle Epoque depending on your year and location, consisted of a camisole and split drawers typically combined into combinations, over which a corset would be worn under a corset cover, which would help maintain the quality of the corset itself, followed by a petticoat. And details like ruffles and gores help accentuate the bust to obtain the popular pigeon breast silhouette and fill out the skirt. Without these undergarments or rough approximations to them, the proper silhouette just isn't going to be achieved. And likewise, 1900 skirt length is something that just wasn't absolute. Young girls wore shorter skirts or smock dresses, with teenage girls wearing longer but not fully ankle-length skirts along with a training corset. Likewise, bicycle skirts, which typically reached to the knees or lower calves, were commonly used by women to comfortably ride bicycles. And because of that, this is why it's so important to know what you're working with here. Likewise, it's also really good to research what kinds of clothing, colors, accessories, and fabrics were used. And remember, even if a period falls under one name, the clothes are going to vary decade by decade. Once you have a good understanding of the intricacies of your era, then you can actually start obtaining your clothes, and there are plenty of ways to do this. Now, option A is not for the weak. This is buying actual vintage garments. Sometimes you'll get lucky when you're looking around and you'll find a garment online while you're out thrifting or at an auction or a estate sale that is perfect for your target area down to the year. But especially with terms of sizing and price, this is very much a zone of luck, money, and research skills that more often than not, is very difficult to construct a whole outfit out of, especially going earlier and earlier into history. Option B is, of course, making your own garments, and more often than not, this is going to be time-consuming and expensive, but arguably better for accuracy. In my experience, buying all the fabric I need for an entire Edwardian outfit, from the undergarments down to the coat, pre-tariffs, was over $400, and I still have to go and make the entire costume. But historical sewing also requires a lot of skill and will vary a lot, period by period. And while there are cheap ways to find fabric, this also really is just something that's not for the weak or loose of wallet. Then there's always buying firsthand, and oftentimes this is where we may start seeing significant shifts away from absolute perfect true to form accuracy. If you're one of those aforementioned accuracy Nazis, brands like American Duchess that produce good quality reproductions based off of actual archival pieces are for you, but they're almost always exceedingly expensive. And I really don't want to think about how much I paid for these shoes, but you know what? They're amazing quality, so c'est la vie, I guess. But even then, the shoes I use in my Edwardian outfit, which you're going to see later on, were $30 and have zippers, but, you know, who cares? And that's why using modern items is kind of the real pariah of period costuming, because even though it can work really, really well at times, and actually may be the best option more often than you think, some people are just too stuck in their ways to accept that sometimes an Old Navy button-down will work for an outfit meant to look like it's from the 60s. Notwithstanding, there's also always a small business. I bought this Edwardian style hat pin from Etsy for a little over $10, and you know what? It works. It fits in perfectly. Finally, there is of course thrifting or buying secondhand or from a dead stock brand. You know, dead stock is very big with historical reenactors, especially those who are really into World War II, so on and so forth. And this is kind of the same situation as buying firsthand, especially if you're not buying dead stock. It's really a matter of luck and budget, but it can get you really far if you commit to the practice of thrifting, which is very ritualistic and something you just got to accept. You're not going to have a good day. But in all honesty, you should just do what works best for you. More often than not, I combine all of the above, or at least the latter three. Regardless, perfection is the enemy of good, and if you're that concerned with the fact that a member of your already niche community is wearing shoes with the zippers, then you should probably just check your priorities, in all honesty. Anyways, now the hard part is done, and we can actually get dressed. And obviously, this is where the variation is going to peak, because no two periods are identical, and I'm just showing you 3 hyper-specific years and circumstances. But anyways, here are my examples layer by layer. So as an adolescent in 1910, like I said before, I'd start with my separates and or bloomers in a slip, which I am subbing with a slip from Target and some bike shorts, and my stockings, purchased from Amazon. I have my poor man's corset substitute while I wait to actually finish sewing my period accurate corset, and which I'm going to follow by some shapewear that I stole from my mom to substitute as a corset cover. Since I'm going to wear a black skirt, I'm going to use a layered black frilly skirt instead of an actual 50s petticoat I have, because it will blend in better. And this is also the stage where I like to put on my shoes, my earrings, and do my hair and makeup. And, you know, fun fact, by 1910, blue eyeshadow had become popular amongst women in urban areas, especially New York City. It wasn't just the 90s, believe it or not. I then add my shirtwaist, skirt, belt, and gloves that I would wear when I would leave the house. And if it was finished, I'd add my aforementioned hat and hairpin. In 1947, general women's undergarments differed slightly from the modern day in the form of girdles, which, like corsets, are now reduced to being seen as restrictive lingerie instead of the supportive and practical garments they were. They were just more standard. And while I'm not wearing a girdle, I am using an underwire bra and nylon stockings, which, like underwire bras, began their slow re-emergence going into the 50s as ration requirements were withdrawn. And from there, I also have a slip, and now I'm just going to put on my aforementioned wretchedly expensive shoes. I'm going to put on a rayon dress, actually from 1947, do my hair and makeup, add some earrings and a watch, and grab a hair scarf to protect my hairstyle when I go outside, as well as a coat, just in case. In 1970, undergarments essentially equate to the modern day with very minor differences in form, and you're not going to see that because I am a minor. And since we're going mid-century medieval or mod-evil, as someone a lot funnier than me coined, I'm going to take a jumpsuit that I embroidered with an illuminated manuscript style motif and layer it over a button-down. I'm going to do my makeup in a way that emphasizes my eyes to make Twiggy proud, and add a very medieval style kerchief to contain my hair, and I put on my earrings and watch, those same zippered boots with heels, and a 1960s trench coat. And that's it. Now you know the basic process that goes into historical costuming, with the added bonus of some obscure fashion trivia about 3 very specific years and outfit circumstances. I don't really have anything else to say about this. This is kind of a niche problem for a niche community, where your problem is going to change in the every single nitty-gritty detail, and regardless, it's still going to follow the same, basic 3-step program of research, gather, and clothe thyself. But, research is important. I feel like that's kind of significant, because if you know what you have to do, then you can make anything work.